You ever see that old thing in movies where they take a book and carve out a bunch of the pages such that it makes a little bit of a cavity in which they can hide something, be it money, a gun, or the secret microfilm that the KGB is after, or whatever? Well, I've always thought that was pretty cool, and for years I've been meaning to get around to trying to make one of my own. And to me, about the neatest looking version of this is the one in which you can hide a gun inside of a book. So in this video, I'll show exactly how I'm going to do that. And my first step was to find an old book that I didn't really care about destroying. And as luck would have it, I recently came across this very old book, and I picked it up for about $3. Not only is it very old, and I have no qualms about destroying it, but it seemed like the perfect title for this sort of a project, and it gave me a little bit of a chuckle. Now, there's a bunch of different ways that I've seen people do this, and I'd say that what I'm going to try is kind of a combination of a few of those ideas, and we're going to see how well it comes out. So let's get right into it and start making our hidden cavity gun book vault thing. Right off the bat, I'm gonna get this dust jacket cover thing out of the way. This thing is pretty ratty and appears to have been taped and glued in place, probably sometime around the Reagan administration. There's also this old library tag glued onto the first page, but that's not really bothering anything, so I'll just leave it alone. Now I'll flip forward a dozen or so pages and fold back those pages along with the front and back covers. I'll temporarily put a couple of clamps on there to keep it all out of the way. As for the bulk of the pages into which I will cut my gun-shaped cavity, the first thing I'm going to do is glue the outer edges so all the pages stick together and cannot move around much. So I'll clamp a couple little pieces of wood in place to get those pages pressed together nice and tight. Now I'm just coming in with some ordinary wood glue and a cheapo disposable paintbrush, and I'll just brush on a good amount of glue. Regular Elmer's glue would work fine too, but I have a ton of this wood glue on hand, so that's what I'm using. I want to use enough that the glue soaks in a bit and really binds everything, but I don't want to use so much that it's just dripping and oozing everywhere. After leaving it alone for a while to dry, this edge is pretty solid and mostly glued, but I see there's a few pages near the bottom here that didn't quite adhere, so I'll end up putting a little more glue right there. Now for the top and bottom edges. I'll use some heavy drill bit cases this time to weigh down those pages and keep everything snug, and just go through and brush on that glue, same as I did with the long edge. I'll go get some lunch and give this all a good while to completely dry. Okay, edges are all nicely glued and feeling very solid, so let's start working on this cutout. First, the outline. This here is the smallest gun I own, and it's going to fit very comfortably into a book of this size. So I'll figure out how I want it to be positioned, and then trace around it with a pencil. I'll take care to angle my pencil out a little as I go to make sure my outline is slightly bigger all the way around than the gun itself, just giving myself a little wiggle room to ensure the gun fits in there. And because my eyes are old and bad, I'll retrace that light pencil line with a Sharpie, which will make the cutting step much easier for me to see what I'm doing. That's looking pretty good to me, so let's start making this cutout. I'm going to use my scroll saw for this job, but that means I need to get my saw blade into the cutout area. Since the blade is connected at the top and bottom on a scroll saw, this means I have to start by drilling a hole. I don't want to cut through the edge of the book from one side, so I'll start by drilling a hole somewhere in the cutout area, using a drill bit that's slightly wider than the scroll saw blade. And I'm just using this piece of wood to help compress all those pages very tightly together so the drill doesn't risk grabbing and tearing any individual pages. Alright, I got my jigsaw, and I'll go ahead and pop that blade off of there. Now I can set my book in place and feed that blade through the hole I drilled, reconnect the blade at the top and bottom, and I'm ready to rock. This is definitely the slowest and most tedious part of this whole project. I need to use my fingers to not only push the book horizontally in the direction I need it to go around that saw blade, but I need to press down very firmly with my fingers right around the blade at all times. This is all about keeping those pages very tightly compacted so the blade can't start tearing at any individual page or pages. Now once I get to about the halfway point, I have to backtrack that blade all the way back to the hole I drilled. because now the spine and covers of the book are going to be in the way if I continue going in this direction. So I'll carefully backtrack to my starting point and then start cutting in the other direction. And as I go, this whole thing is wanting to get more and more floppy because I'm cutting through the very structure that's keeping everything together. So it gets more and more important as I go that I keep constant pressure on the pages on either side of the blade. And once I've gotten all the way around, that big stack of gun-shaped pages pops cleanly and freely away, exactly as I'd hoped would happen. Now I'll just go back to my starting point and clean that edge up a little. Remove the blade once again, and there we have it. A very smooth and clean gun-shaped hole through hundreds of sheets of paper. I'll give the whole thing a gentle vacuuming to get all that paper dust out of there. And now the moment of truth. And it's a perfect fit. If I didn't know any better, I'd almost think I had any idea what I was doing here. Okay, a couple last steps. First, I've got the wood glue and paintbrush back into the picture, because I need to glue the entire inner edge of that cavity. Just like I did on the outer edges of the book, I'll thoroughly paint on the glue to make sure that no pages can move, separate, or fray. I'll put some heavy things back on the pages to keep them nicely compressed while the glue dries, and after leaving it for a while, I've got a very solid inner edge that I'm quite happy with. Just a couple more little things to do. First, fix that back cover in place. So I'm just painting some more glue onto the back of the back page, all around that gun cutout, and just close the back cover, set something heavy on it for a little while. Lastly, I'm seeing this little edge of the first page has started to tear a little bit. I'll just rub a little dab of glue on there to keep it from tearing any further. And I did consider laying one more uncut page over this cavity, gluing it down, and using an X-Acto knife to trim out the gun shape, just as a way to get a nice pretty page in there that didn't have any Sharpie marker or other imperfections on it, but I decided I didn't really care about that. While this cutout does look pretty great to me, it's meant to be functional, not particularly cosmetic. Anyway, after all the glue is 100% dry, my book gun vault is finished and ready to load up and hide in plain sight. So there we have it. All in all, I'd call this a resounding success. I do think I'm going to leave that paper jacket off of the book because it just looks a little nicer without it, and that thing was pretty much in tatters anyway, so there wasn't really going to be any reconnecting it, especially since I kind of need to access this back cover in order to secure it in place. Whatever. This just looks like a good old classic book, unassuming, no one's really going to pay any attention to it. And if anyone did look closely, I guess they'd see the gun control title along the spine there. And I guess about the last thing they'd expect to find inside of it is a gun. So all the methods I used in making this thing ended up working out pretty well. Get the front and back cover out of the way, pull a few pages in the front, also out of the way, glue around the outside edge, of course trace the gun, drill a hole through it so I can feed in the blade from the jigsaw, carefully cut it all out, making sure to keep a lot of pressure right around where the blade is cutting so the pages can't move around. Then glue all these inside edges of the pages, and this thing is really quite solid. Then it's just a matter of gluing the back cover in place, doing a little touch-up work where I kind of started to tear the front page here, and voila. All done, really nice clean cutout. As for how realistically useful this thing really is, and whether or not I'll actually store a gun in this thing on my bookshelf, well, I don't know. I'll probably end up just keeping the guns in the safe where they usually are, because that's just how I like to do it. But should I ever really want to use it, I've got myself this very cool hidden book gun cutout safe, whatever we're calling it. So that's about it. Be sure to like and subscribe and stay up to date with all our latest stuff, including future DIY and weird project videos. And consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/Great Lakes Country. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'm John, and this is Great Lakes Country.